Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Let's talk about the golden rule, shall we?
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the WorryFree Retirement, with offices in Louisville and Bowling Green. Your host, five-time author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
Taking a look at my book again, Don't Follow the Herd, which was published in 2010, and we've been covering in great detail the 7 costly mistakes people are making with their money, and more importantly, how you can avoid them. Now we're on mistake number 4, stockpiling hay in everyone's barn, but not for you. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the golden rule, which is do unto others as you'd have others do unto you. But did you realize that the financial world has its own golden rule? Their golden rule works something like this. It says, he who makes the rules gets the gold. Well, welcome folks to the WorryFree Retirement. I am your host for the next 28 minutes or so, retirement planning specialist Tony Walker. And today, we're continuing our saga as we go through Don't Follow the Herd. And in this case, like we've done over the past 3 weeks, we're covering each mistake as we go. Now, we've talked about blind faith, we've talked about other things, but this is a cow theme. Remember, as we go through this, we last week even talked about risking the cow instead of the milk. Today, again, we're talking about mistake number 4, stockpiling hay for everyone else but you. And you say, Tony, that's an interesting mistake, and that doesn't make sense to me, and what does that have to do with the golden rule you just talked about? Well, as you're about to see, how you stockpile your hay, that's cow talk for money, and more importantly, where you're going to store that hay over time is the key to a worry-free retirement. Let me explain. Again, here's how life kind of works. Let's kind of show this timeline that we're going to put up. By the way, America's favorite financial sidekick, Aaron Orander, and his sidekick, Matt Stebbins, doing a great job producing the show. We really appreciate their efforts. And kind of look at this timeline here. It's kind of interesting when you just look at your life. So we're all born. We then enter childhood and hopefully have an innocent childhood. We're taught to stay in school. We hopefully listen to our teachers and our parents and the coaches. Then we're taught to go to college or trade school, get a good education. You know how that goes. Graduate from school, supposedly get a good high-paying job. Then we go to work with somebody, slave away for the next 40 years or so. Hopefully we've done a good job raising our family. Along the way we gave to charity, volunteered at various organizations, and yes, from a financial standpoint, we've been taught to sock as much money as we can away in that 401k plan. We've been taught by the insurance companies to buy as much insurance as we could afford. We've been taught by the banks and everybody else that, hey, you need to get the stuff now. Just go and borrow the money and pay somebody interest. It'll be all right. And of course, Wall Street has been taught us to give them their money, and they collect fees on all this stuff all along. We don't have a clue what the rules of this game are, other than, supposedly, we're supposed to retire at some magical age out there, stop working, go sit home, maybe play a little golf, do a little hunting, fishing. I met a gentleman the other day. It was kind of funny. I said, hey, what have you been doing since you retired? He kind of looked around embarrassingly. He says, you know what? I've gotten hooked on reruns of The Rifleman. But anyway, we got to ask the financial world this. These folks, who are they? Okay, what have they been doing with our money as we've been stockpiling it in our own barns? And when do we actually get to enjoy this money? In other words, are we maybe stockpiling all this money up for somebody else, or are we really putting it aside for us? Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with this lifelong game plan of working hard, saving hard, providing for others. But at some point, we've got to ask ourselves, who are we really working for? Who are we saving for? And since this is a retirement planning show, we got to ask ourselves, how much of this money that we've worked so hard to create is really going to be for us? Now, before we dive into mistake number 4, and I start raking the financial world over the proverbial financial coals, let me state this. The financial world, in all seriousness, plays a very critical role in our society. It would be very hard to function without financial institutions. We've got to have the government. We've got to have Wall Street. We've got to have insurance companies. We've got to have banks. Hopefully they're all trying to work in our best interest, although that's not always the case. But we have to have these financial institutions. The problem is they are working under a different set of rules. Again, their rule of money is whoever makes the rules gets the goal. So first of all, you got to know what the rules are. And second of all, you got to know how to play the game. My job, assuming you turn your money over to us as your advisor, is to do our best to understand these rules of engagement with the financial world and then know how to deal best with these financial institutions so we can make our money work for us. Again, folks, the four institutions, the rules they play by, this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what is their role, how do they make money on our money, and what do they promise us, and finally, what do we get in return? So when I come back, we're going to dissect the four financial institutions and do just that, and then we're going to show you how you can make more of the money you've got stockpiled in that financial barn of you work for you and use and enjoy that money. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Tired of getting up every day and heading off to work with no end in sight? I'm retirement specialist Tony Walker, and I've helped lots of people retire much sooner than they ever thought possible, and maybe I can help you do the same.
If you're over the age of 50 and have at least $250,000 to invest, schedule your free meeting with Tony to see if you can retire sooner than you think. Simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
Are you retired or retiring soon? Can you afford for your money to take a hit with the stock market being so volatile these days? Nobody can time the market, but having a retirement game plan with Tony Walker Financial gives you peace of mind and sleep insurance. Learn how to prevent losses in your retirement accounts and plan your retirement around an income you can never outlive. Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com today to schedule a personal meeting with Tony to secure your hard-earned money. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
And now it's time for Tony in the Trenches.
Welcome back to the WorryFree Retirement. Great Tony in the Trenches here. It comes from Jan, who's up in the Elizabethtown area. Jan writes, Tony, I keep hearing this term coming from the financial world. I've got this in quotes, working in the best interest of the client. Jan asks, what does that mean, and how do I know an advisor is in fact working in my best interest? Well, that's a good one. Technically, the definition of a fiduciary, which we are, means that you'll work in the client's best interest. But that doesn't necessarily mean that fiduciary is going to have a process to help you in retirement. There's lots of people out there that could be fiduciaries by law, but that doesn't mean they know anything about retirement planning, which is a totally separate field. That's why I've created the Worry-Free Retirement process. We'll get into this more in another show, but what the process does is it allows you, your loved ones, our staff, and yours truly to stay on the same page so that we can meet the changing needs of your situation. So we'll tell you more about that process later, but in the meantime, if you have interest in sitting down, going through this process, meeting in person with someone such as myself who is a fiduciary, log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and we'll be happy to meet you in person. All right, let's get back to it. Based on my experience, I've been doing this now 34 years, folks. I can really boil this down into two phases. You have two phases in your life. We call this people at work and capital at work. You're working hard. As we talk about Farmer Brown in my book, Don't Follow the Herd, you're stockpiling money. You're putting hay in the barn for you for some future use. You work hard at putting this money away, right? And then as we can see, if you're not careful, just like Farmer Brown, you've got to make sure this money's protected. You know, you think about it. When Farmer Brown builds a barn and he puts hay in it, the point is the hay has to be protected from rain, from vermin. Also, here's an interesting thing. You've got to use the hay at some point or the hay goes bad. And this is the same way with money. If we imagine your 401k, let's say, is a barn. You're working hard. You're stockpiling hay into that barn. You've got to remember that at some point you've got to drag the hay out and use it. In the meantime, people are taking fees against it. There's inflation. There's risk. And you know what? There's something called the law of diminishing returns. Now, I know this is going to sound odd, but actually the longer you leave that money in your 401k, the worse it gets. Farmer Brown knew that, and we're trying to teach our clients how to do that as well. So we might think of your 401k as a barn, the hay's the money, and the purpose of the barn, obviously, is to eventually pull the hay out and use it, not let it sit there and just squander away. But the financial world is not that interested in that. So what we have to do is understand what rules are they operating on, why do they want our money, how do they get it, what are they promising, and what do we get in return. So this is on page 107 of the book, Don't Follow the Herd. We'll just put this up full screen for you and let me go over this. It's really interesting. If you think about the government, if we refer to them as a financial institution, and this is going to make a lot more sense. Let's pick Social Security as an example. So the government sponsors and funds Social Security, but they don't do that with their money, they do it with our money. That's called FICA taxes. And you'll see this if you look at your paycheck, they withhold that. Your employer has to match it. If you're self-employed, it's a real doozy. It's around 15% a year that goes into, apparently, some sort of fund that's going to fund Social Security. So they collect taxes. They promise us hope, really. We hope the government's going to be there to oblige and meet these obligations. And a similar example would be the government of the state of Kentucky. Teachers are nervous because they're supposed to get a pension. The government's the one that's been, quote, watching over this money. The teachers have to hope that money's going to be there. So what do they hope they get? In many cases, all you get is inflation, and you're hoping you get mailbox money. That would be pensions or Social Security, all right? That would be an example of the government. So they collect taxes, they promise us hope, and in many cases, all we get is inflation and taxation on top of that. Number two, the second institution we have to be concerned with, what's their golden rule? Their golden rule is to get our money through fees and commissions. Now, mainly it's been fees. Years ago, Wall Street used to charge a lot of commissions. They got away from that, and they realized that, hey, it's a lot better for us if we just charge fees. Now, incidentally, I have to qualify this. As a registered investment advisor, if you put money through our Charles Schwab platform, guess what? We charge fees as well. Now, we think our fees are a lot more competitive. Our fees for our managed platform, 0.6%. So if you give us $100,000, it's $600 a year versus the average money manager who's going to charge you about 1.5% or $1,500 a year. But nevertheless, whether your account goes up or down, we still get our fees. Now, why do we do that? Now, Wall Street does that because they're promising more growth. The trade-off of the fees is you hope you grow your money much more greater than what they're charging you in fees. Otherwise, what's the point? Now, while we say we hope we get more growth, we do it mainly for planning purposes because we want the liquidity and the access to the Charles Schwab account. Very much different approach. But nevertheless, if you're going to go that route, if you're going to try to get more growth, you got to understand that growth and risk are traveling companions. So you are going to have to take some more risk. The third financial institution, probably one of my favorites, I've been around insurance companies for that whole 34 years I've been in business, is insurance companies. Now, how do they get our money, Tony? What's their rule? How do they make the rules and get money? Well, they get it through premiums. So anytime you put money with a insurance company, even, listen closely, even if it's an annuity, because the annuity is a contract issued by insurance companies, technically that is not really an investment. That means you've given a premium to the insurance company. And you say, well, why is it a premium? What do they need a premium for? Because they have risk. The risk is if you have an annuity and they're guaranteeing you mailbox money for the rest of your life, they've got some risk, so they call it a premium. Now, what does an insurance company provide you? What are you really getting from them? You hope you're getting what I call sleep insurance. You're getting guarantees, something Wall Street can't give you. So in the case of our annuities that we do so much of, we go through insurance companies. What we're able to promise is that insurance company is going to be able to contractually guarantee you an income, we call it mailbox money, for the rest of your life. Incidentally, we got a brand new free download. I've had this book out for years. It's called The Annuity Decision Guide for Savers. Now, the thing about this Annuity Decision Guide for Savers, you used to have to order a hard copy. Now through the magic of technology and Matt Stebbins at the helm here, look at this on the website. Isn't that cool? Beautiful little download. You can download that as well. If you want to download a free copy of Mailbox Money for Life, again, you're just going to log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com, provide some basic information, and you can download that immediately. Now, after you download it, if you want to sit and talk in person about your situation and how an annuity can help you provide that mailbox money, obviously let me know. And then finally, I'm looking at my cheat notes here, banks. Now, I love banks. I have money at the bank. Banks, there's nothing wrong with banks. The problem is banks aren't paying hardly anything on our money. Now, it's interesting the way a bank is set up under law, under what's called the fractional reserve system. A bank, tell me if we could franchise this deal, folks. A bank, as long as they have $1 on deposit, can turn around and borrow $9 on that dollar from other banks and loan that out. So let's think about this a minute. You or I can't do this. In other words, I can't go tell the bank I've got $1 and would they loan me $9 on that dollar? You know, they're going to say, no, we'll loan you 80 cents on the dollar, but not $9 on the dollar because we got to have some cushion here. But they can. And then they take that dollar, they borrow more money, and then they loan it out to people like you and I, and we pay 5 or 6% while they're only paying 1 or 2%. So why do they do that? Because we want more stuff. Let's face it, folks. And the next show, by the way, it's going to be a good one. We're going to talk about how much do you really need, and this whole stuff thing is really getting out of hand. But basically, we're willing to forego interest. We're going to pay them money for this money in order to get stuff, and in the end, what do we have? More debt. They make more money, we have more debt. So that's the 4 rules of financial institution and how they get our money. Now, our job is to look at that and say, okay, that's the real world. I get it. They got to make money, but I don't have to necessarily play the game this way. So what are 2 things, I'm taking this out of the book, what are 2 things, Tony, I can do now to take control of my money? And the wonderful thing about this is, these 2 options I'm going to share with you, any age can participate in either one of these, any age. Now, preferably, the split IRA concept, obviously you have to have wages and be working, but even a young child. Many of my clients, they're constantly saying, Tony, what can I do to invest for my children or grandchildren? What I'm getting ready to show you is perfect. Also, many of you are saying, Tony, you know, the roller coaster ride of the stock market, we're filming this on November 20th, 2018. It's all over the place. You may be sitting there saying, Tony, how do you use the market for liquidity, whatever that means, and then how do you bring in this guaranteed mailbox money? What is this split IRA? I'm going to show you that. But first, let me talk about something. This is found on 110 of the book, page 110. We'll put this up full screen. And this is an illustration for my oldest son, Philip. And what this is called a dividend participating whole life policy. I encouraged Philip to take this out when he was 23 years of age. And actually, he's been putting in, with my help here and there, not now, he's paying all of it on his own, $500 a month into this contract. And I said, Philip, before you do any investing, do this. And he said, why is that, Dad? And I said, because I'm going to teach you how to control your money, have access to it, have flexibility, save a lot in taxes, and I'm going to teach you how to become your own banker, all right? So basically, as you can see, I'll just abbreviate this. At age 23, Philip started contributing $500 a month to this contract. This policy will never increase in premium. And look at based on the current dividends, which are very conservative here. At age 65, he would have $883,000. Now, the difference between this and a 401k, this is real money, folks. He could use this along the way, borrow it tax-free, pay himself back plus interest, and as well, assuming he pays all that back plus interest at age 65, it's scheduled to have, based on current dividends, a death benefit when he dies, assuming he died at 65, of over $1.7 million. Now, folks, that's cold, hard, tax-free cash. So that's one option that we can help you with. This is something anybody could consider doing, especially if you're not yet retired. This is a powerful tool for retirement planning, and I'll show you how that works. Now, the second thing I cover under this particular mistake is not having a split IRA. If you've got a 401k plan, IRA, if you're over 59 and a half, listen closely, and still working, we can show you how to safeguard that 401k or IRA. If you've got a thrift savings account, if you've got a lump sum pension. Now, here's how the split IRA works. What we do is we take that 401k or IRA and put it into 2 or more buckets. We'll stay with the milk theme and the cows here. The first bucket will be used for immediate income. We will handle that. That's going to be in our Charles Schwab platform. We have minimal fees. We'll try to keep the risk as low as we can, and we can send you any amount of money you want. Now, the second bucket, that's your mailbox money account bucket. That's growing at a guaranteed rate until such time as you want us to send you that lifetime income. Now, this is not as easy as it looks. This is why I have this full-time staff that monitors this. This is the process that keeps it simple for you and makes sure that should something happen to you, your spouse will be okay, and that also that your family will understand how we're marrying this together, how we're going to take the one IRA, use and enjoy it, how we're going to have the second IRA to make sure that your money is protected. This is the key. So what we're talking about is making sure that you have enough money, making sure that you understand the rules of the game, and more importantly, making sure that you use and enjoy the money while you can versus leaving it stockpiled up in the barn all the time. Well, you know what? The Bible talks about this too. The Bible has its own set of golden rules, and these are golden rules that you can cherish forever. I'm going to get into them, but as you know, I got to get me a cup of coffee. I'll be right back.
Are you retired or retiring soon? Do you have a 401k, IRA, thrift savings account, 403b, or lump sum pension that you'd like to move to safer territory? Did you know that all the money you see on your 401k statement isn't really yours? Depending on your overall taxable income, the government has essentially a lien on your 401k that can tax as much as 40% of your money when you go to take it out. Tony Walker calls this the 401k tax tumor. For over 33 years, retirement specialist Tony Walker has helped thousands of savers worry less about money by creating game plans to deal with your tax tumor. Get control of your retirement by controlling the taxes owed on it. Schedule a free meeting to see if you can reduce your tax tumor and provide a guaranteed income you can never outlive. To get started, simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
Tired of the roller coaster ride of the stock market? Let Tony Walker show you how to smooth out the ride with your money. Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and let's get started.
All right, good cup of coffee, and we got to get into it. Aaron says, chop, chop here. So back in Jesus' day, the hardworking merchants and shepherds of the day didn't stockpile money in other people's barns. They didn't get a paycheck stub showing their net after-tax earnings and then run down to the Bank of Jerusalem. Now, back then, people had to lay up money just like we do today. But since they didn't have banks, Wall Street, insurance companies, oh, by the way, they did have the government collecting taxes. Some things never change, do they? They instead would lay up their treasures a lot of times by sneaking out, this is true, sneaking out in the middle of the night, digging areas around in the backyard or wherever, and hiding it. I met a gentleman I talked to years ago. It was a funny story. He said he was doing that at his house. I said, you got money buried? He goes, yeah, but guess what, son? Nobody knows where it is. I said, nobody? He goes, nope. And I said, so what happens when you die? And he thought, he never thought about that. So I said, you better tell somebody you got it back there. But anyway, in Jesus' day, people, they were called mud diggers. They would watch the people go out to bury their money, and then they would follow them out there after they went back home and dig it up. And back then they had vermin. You know, vermin would eat their food if they tried to store it. They had thieves. They had these mud diggers. And all the while, everybody's trying to store up this treasure for the future, which is what it's all about, right? Well, look at Matthew 6:19. Jesus addresses this in Matthew 6:19, and he says simply this, do not lay up for yourselves treasures upon earth, listen to this, where moth and rust destroy. Now let's stop there. If you think of mothballs, they're to keep away these little tiny moths that can invade your closet, and they will literally chew up your clothes. So if you try to store up your clothes, even a little moth can eat it away. Well, what about rust? Obviously, in modern times, if we think of a car, if it literally is rusting away, you can't store up a car and just leave it in a garage. You've got to keep it polished and keep it running. It has to be nurtured. And then finally, we talked about thieves. You keep money around, sitting around long enough and tell enough people about it, somebody's going to try to take it away from you. But that's not the case with God. God wants us to lay up treasures in heaven because in heaven, The moths can't get to it, the rust can't get to it, and obviously thieves are not going to be up there to steal it. Now, since this is a financial show, and since I too make money by helping savers with their money, how have I reconciled these verses of Scripture? What, in my humble opinion, did Jesus mean about this? I think what he means is just to live off each day what you have and not necessarily worry too much about stockpiling things in the future. There's a balance here. This is where we help. In fact, if you slide on down to verse 21, he says the key here is your true treasure. He says, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So last week, for instance, we talked about this idea of the merchant who found the one pearl he'd always been looking for and selling all that he had to get that pearl. And you know what that pearl was? I think it was his faith in the finished work of eternal life, promised by faith, and yes, our good friend Jesus. That's the true treasure. And that thought, that one thought, I believe, should be with you forever. And it was for the man that found the pearl. There is no law of diminishing returns. In our economy, there is. The longer you keep something, the more the moths can get it, the rust can get it, the thieves can break in. But in God's economy, His golden rule of treating others the way you want to be treated will follow you all the way to the ends of the earth. And that is an economy you can count on. Well, how about you? You may be sitting there saying, Tony, again, great words of wisdom on the Scripture thing, man, but I need some help here. I've been saving hard. I didn't realize all these rules of engagement out there. No wonder I don't feel like I'm getting ahead. And no wonder, as a gentleman said the other day, I don't feel like there's anybody in my corner. Well, as a fiduciary, as an independent advisor, my job is to work for you. And that's exactly what we do at Tony Walker Financial. And I'd like the opportunity to meet with you in person and explain our process and to see how we can help you worry less about money. It's easy to do. Just log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Now, once there, when you click on that Let's Get Started, that information is sent to our office in complete confidence. We will contact you and schedule a convenient appointment for you and I to sit down and look at your information. It takes about 30 minutes to go through an initial questionnaire that you and I will talk about. At the second appointment, you and I will meet and I will share in writing my assessment for you to look at and to keep. If you want to follow through and do business with us, fine. We would be happy to try to help you in that vein as well. Hope you've enjoyed today's show. We're about out of time. Next week, we're going to have some fun. We're going to get to the next mistake in our book, Don't Follow the Herd. It's going to be a good one. But between now and then, you remember, if all else fails, you be worry-free. Make it a good one.
Thank you for watching the Worry-Free Retirement with Tony Walker. If you need a safe and simple game plan for your retirement, log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and schedule a free, no-obligation meeting with Tony.